biggest classroom I have ever taught to. I want to take you back to that very first day in my classroom. And like the cheerleaders on the stage earlier, I was the obnoxious cheerleader from hell in high school. And I didn't think I wanted to be a teacher. I went away to college, and I was thinking I was going to be a lawyer. And when I made that fateful call to my father and said, I don't think I want to go to law, I want to go into teaching, he almost fell out of his chair and thought, we've spent so much money to send you away to school and to graduate school, and you want to be a teacher? And not only that, I wanted to work in the inner city, following the Los Angeles riots. So rather than sending me on my way with a shiny red apple, my dad teased me about taking a bulletproof vest for my first day of school. And I had coveted this polka dot dress that Julia Roberts had worn in Pretty Woman. So I remember going to my first day. I had a polka dot dress and pearls and my briefcase and a syllabi. And in my mind, I shamelessly thought that literature was going to jump off the page of the syllabi and change my students. The tardy bell rang, and in walked my students. And in that corner sat Maria Reyes, in the back, wearing big, baggy pants, not with pencils or pens or any kind of writing accoutrements. I think she later told me that she had probably a little gun in one pocket and maybe a switchblade in the other. And Maria Reyes was brought to my class by a probation officer. And the probation officer had worked with this young girl who, at 11 years old, did not aspire to follow in the footsteps of scholars and go places like Stanford or Harvard. But she wanted to follow in the footsteps of her father and what she knew. And since her father was taken away from her in kindergarten at the ripe age of 5 with handcuffs and taken to San Quentin, that's what Maria wanted to do. She wanted to be like Dad. So at 11 years old, when Maria was jumped into this game and beat so savagely that she was put in the hospital for 3 weeks, she felt that she was well on her way to getting to San Quentin herself. When she got out, she didn't learn times tables from teachers. She learned how to measure drugs. She learned what a dime bag was. She learned how to ditch school and hot rod cars. And the first time she was arrested, she went away. Once to boot camp, another time to juvenile hall. And at the end of her 8th grade year, she was failing out of school, all Fs, in the system, and destined to go back and for more time. A probation officer felt sorry for her and thought, God, if we throw this little girl away who's about this big, she's never going to get out, and she'll just be a part of this system. So he decided to do something different. He decided to put her in house arrest, to enroll her in a different school, with different gangs, and in she walked into my class. And I remember that first day passing out a syllabi and thinking that all of these books were going to leap off the page. And within about 13 seconds, the syllabi came back at me in the form of an airplane, crumpled up ball, I think a spit wad. And one of Maria's friends raised his hand and said, why do we have to keep reading books by dead white guys in tights? So I looked at my syllabi, and sure enough, everyone on there was either dead, in tights, or wore a toga 2,000 years ago. But I started thinking about those great works of literature, Homer and Shakespeare. And I started thinking about, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, what did Homer write about? What was Shakespeare saying? And in this crazy story, the Odyssey, about a journey that Odysseus had to face Cyclops and sirens and be tied against the mast. Essentially, what he did was go from point A to point B. So I started thinking, well, maybe Maria and Darius and all these other students have an Odyssey of their own. And every morning they have to wake up at point A and figure out how they're going to get to point B, how they're going to make it out alive, how they're going to make it home safely through rival gangs, through drive-by shootings. And so I started thinking about comparing these great works of literature to what my students knew. And I started thinking about all the times that I was in school. There was always people who were smarter than me, who had fancier degrees, and there was always some kind of hierarchy. So I started thinking that maybe what I need to do is to get off my hierarchy and to give my students validation, give them degrees. And if I have these fancy degrees from fancy schools that my parents sent me away to. Maybe my students have degrees of their own. And maybe Maria, maybe she has a PhD of the streets. Maybe she's so sophisticated and savvy that I have to learn from her. Maybe rather than solely being a teacher, maybe I need to be a student as well. So I began listening to her to figure out why she hated reading, why she hated writing, why she hated everyone in my class, why she hated this polka dot wearing, pearl wearing teacher, to figure out what was going on behind the scenes, what would cause this little girl to get Fs, what would cause this little girl to want to be in a gang, what would cause this girl, when her back was against the wall, to put up her fist, to pick up a gun, to pick up a spray can, and to fight. And what I wanted her to do when her back was against the wall was to not put up those dukes, but to pick up a pen and to write about it. And one day, one of her friends made a chilling comment. He said, "You know, Miss G, it's like we live in an undeclared war zone." And I started thinking about that and how different their lives were to mine. I grew up in a very large house, had loving parents, was a cheerleader, and I started thinking about this concept of an undeclared war. And I started listening to Maria describe what it was like to see her cousin shot and killed by police officers, what it was like to be jumped, what it was like to have people spray paint her house, what it was like to have bars on her windows, what it was like every single day that she walked out of her house. So I started thinking about literature, and I started thinking about books written by and about and for kids that really lived in wars, kids who really had their backs against the wall. And the first book I thought of was The Diary of Anne Frank.